whatever it is, there are other factors that come into play that may destabilize you completely. But you're saying that if there's something you can do about it, then do it. So are you saying that if there's nothing that you can do about it, then you must just carry on situation?
I honestly do not believe that there are situations in which you have no power. I don't believe that. So long as you're alive, we have enough stories of those who have even their final rights have been taken away. Please read any of the writings of Nelson Mandela being in prison for 27 years, and everything has been taken away from you. Your family, your life, your freedom, literally your time has been taken away. And yet, even in that same space, they were sitting around with others who are of similar mind and still speaking of a free South Africa because their mind was still alert. I mean, if we can sit and say that we have absolutely nothing we can do, then that's it. Then you have nothing you can do. Then why are you still on earth? I honestly believe if you are alive, then there is something that you can do to change your life. And so please do wake up, look for help, find something that you can do to shift your life. I've already quoted him already, but I think it's necessary in some of the discussions that we're having. I think it's because I've been listening to quite a few of the discussions he's had. A gentleman, I mentioned Jordan Peterson before, and in his writings, he talks to young men specifically, and he says, if your life is in trouble, start with just cleaning up your room. Just tidy up your room. In the morning, make your bed, sweep up a little bit, that's it. Because you've achieved something. The room was a mess, you brought order to it. And after a while, that becomes the habit. Then tidy up your house. Then after that, put on a nice outfit when you leave the house. And I'm telling you, there is a difference. When you walk into a room and people notice, oh, hey, you look different, something is going to shift. That's brought something to my mind. That's how I got my job at Centonomy. So I was a supplier to Centonomy before I actually joined, and I joined at a lower level in the training department, right? And I was a supplier, and I was part of the, and they were looking for part-time trainers, right? And so when I used to go to the office at that time, most of the time I would be in a pair of jeans and a shirt, and that was my general outlook, right? Yeah. When I went for my first interview at Centonomy, I put on a suit. And let me tell you, I don't think the team remembers anything other than the fact that day, the first day they saw Waithaka wearing a suit. And I think that set me apart from everybody else who was coming in because, and everyone noticing it gives you a dopamine hit, you know, and it says like, hey, look, imagine if that's the effect, then what's the next thing that I can do? And so, listen, we have opportunities so long as we are alive. Hey, I have to give just one more, because this was a local inspirational story. Oh my goodness, the name I have forgotten. But I'll tell the story and you can go and look it up. There's an amazing lady who, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, if you've ever seen a game called Kenya at 50 or 50-50. Kenya at 50. I can see even your producers in the box out there nodding their heads. So they're Kenyans who've seen it. It's a board game. Yeah. That board game was created by a quadriplegic. She cannot move. Beyond her head. She was in a tragic accident. Please look it up. Whoever can find it online and you can share in the link there. 50-50. And she put this together, and it's a game that is being played across Kenya right now. When I interviewed her, because this is in a past life that I had when I was doing that, and we did a video over her achievement. This lady has no hands, no feet. She has to be driven around. But she created a game that is being played by thousands of Kenyans, celebrating our history. You tell me you don't have something you can do? Come on.
Let me ask you something. Where does expectation fit into all this? Because whenever people talk of disappointment and failure cannot exist if there's no expectation. How do you measure it? How do you align it to reality? How do you ensure that it is something that has been achievable, or you don't need to? If I'm to go by common 21st century mantra, you put your heart into it, your mind into it, and proceed.
No, I spoke about it early on, and I said targets are necessary because we're aiming creatures. We aim at something. And so that's a form of expectation, that there's an outcome that you're expecting, because that expected outcome is what's driving you. And once you achieve that expected outcome, look for the next driving outcome that is there.
Haven't you heard of people saying, I have no expectation. I don't expect anything from this person?
Well, they are speaking... I guess in a negative faith, if you can say that towards someone.
Maybe they're lived experienced.
But I must say this. Yes. From my experience, you can call out greatness in others the same way that you can call out failure.
What do you mean call out greatness?
I think we have... Let me use my personal example. I am a result of mentors. And I have mentors. I have a dear friend of mine called Peter. When I was still in school, he's a lawyer. He'd just randomly call me and tell me, hey, I'm going to teach people about the Constitution. Okay?
Okay.
Come. He'd pick me up and we go. I was a student. I had nothing to do with, I'm not even a lawyer, but he was bringing me into that same space that he was in. I have other friends who would call me out into leadership and say, hey, Wadaka, can you go and lead that group at church, for example? Or can you take up that responsibility? And they were calling out greatness in me before I even saw it in myself. And so, in as much as, yes, you can say, oh, you'll end up with nothing, you are useless. We laughed at this at the office the other day, because many teachers, I'm not speaking against UCT at the moment, I'm just saying many teachers call out poverty in their students and say, you'll never amount to it. I mean, there are some of my colleagues who are extremely successful, amazing, especially women, and they remember being in school and teachers would say things like that you'll never amount to anything, and yeah, we need to be aware of what we say. Our words actually carry a lot of weight.
Well, I want to get into something just a bit. Please. It's a bit sticky, and folks would say that a discussion like this is the preserve of those who are guaranteed that maybe you have something to eat at the end of the day. Okay, you can be inspired for greatness. You can call out greatness. You can say, well, you can get in a car and go somewhere. You can do something. Again, it is a preserve of those who have some kind of hope at the end of the day.
I disagree with that completely.
Why?
Wholeheartedly. Because we have seen those who are in that very scenario rise to greatness that you can't see. One of my dear friends, a gentleman called Johnson Mwakazi, you know him, he's in the media as well. He grew up in Kibera. He grew up with a single mom, I believe. That's the story I think that he told. And he grew up in the state where a meal at the end of the day was not a guarantee. But somebody called greatness out in him, because when they heard his voice and his ability to perform at that time, they gave him opportunity, and he took that to the next level. He developed it, because just having a voice is not enough. There are many people with great voices, but they're not on radio, they're not on telly. But he used it when it was called out of him in school. And the opportunities that were put in front of him, he took them. He spoke at one of our events recently and told his story. And so when I say that, every one of us has an opportunity in front of us. That's what I believe beyond the shadow of a doubt. And it's for us to walk into that opportunity. Hey, I found the name. Her name is Casey.
Casey.
Casey is the one who actually produced the 50-50 game.
Yeah.
Kenya at 50.
We place a lot of emphasis on money, and money then gives birth to opportunity.
Yeah.
That's how, in our minds, that's how, it doesn't matter where you are, that you think about it like that. And if there is a lack, then you are disabled. I know we might go back to what you're saying, that it is impossible, but truth, why that? How do we how do folks step away from placing the emphasis on it and saying, look, without it, I really cannot do 1, 2, 3. But it's true. Well, today, if you don't have money, you're not eating.
That's
if you don't have money, you're not paying your rent.
So you better get some money.
So now we're saying, if I'm in a position where it's difficult for me to get there, what happens? I mean, we can. We can sit here and I can sit here and I can hear you and I can be encouraged by the words that you speak. But then I will turn in the opposite direction and the reality will slap me in the face once again.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the reality?
So, I've thrown out a lot of quotes, but it's necessary. I think as human beings, we grow as human beings by learning from others. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel.
Actually, what you're doing is good. It's called referencing.
Exactly.
It's necessary.
It's absolutely necessary.
Citation is necessary.
It's absolutely necessary, because essentially what you're doing is you're telling someone, we're not telling you a myth. It's been done before.
Correct.
So if it's been done by another human being, it means it's possible. Other human beings can do the same thing.
Amen.
Yes.
Dr. Miles Monroe, he in one of his speeches, and this one has inspired me a lot of the time, he said, don't chase after money, chase after value. Because if you are valuable, money will chase after you. And that's the key. We are so busy looking for money, but we're not creating value in any way. And here's what I mean by value. There's a wonderful young gentleman who's he's a cashier at Java, all right? And I noticed him a couple of times because I've stopped at a couple of Javas. You have meetings there. And he was moved from one Java to the other. And you remembered him. Why? Because when I got to the till, he smiled at me. And he made my day better. And he asked me about my day. And he seemed as if he cared. He was alert. He was awake. He was aware. And that means that he has become valuable to the organization such that he can be moved to enhance the experience in newer outlets that are being brought up. So in whatever space that you are, can you bring value? Even a simple smile can change everything. People think it's all about that you have to have an education, that you have to have this. Yeah, all those things are good. But if you are valuable, build yourself up. Take opportunities that are in front of you. I'm challenged by our former an apartment block I used to live in. I think I mentioned this story before, but I love to tell stories again, where we had a watchman who was there who doubled his income by simply stating, he's one of those watchmen. He's not part of an organization. We just hired him as, a watchman, as the guy there. Yeah. And all he would do is he asked, can I be washing your cars at night? Then I'm awake, I'm alert, I'm actually paying attention, and when things are going on. And by washing all the cars that were in that place, he doubled his income. He became of value. So what are we, employees, we struggle with this completely, and we say, why aren't we being given a raise? Why aren't we being given a promotion and somebody else is being given a promotion? Because they're of value. And let me tell you this, as an employer, you're looking for people around you who are going to add to this scenario, that are going to bring solutions that you feel are in the game with you. And they're not waiting for instructions, but they're trying to bring life into the organization just like you are.
But there is a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Right now in this country, where you find the vast majority of people are simply struggling to live.
Yes.
Literally. So they're not even sure they will eat. So if they're not sure they will eat, they're not sure of many other things.
Yeah.
And if they happen to live in big cities or big towns in the country, the situation is even worse. Because someone in the rural areas will have a farm. They'll have land where they can make a living or get food. But in an urban setting, you have to buy everything, which means you need money. Which means you need to do something to get you the money to do what you need to do.
Today. It's not futurely.
It's today.
It's now.
And that today begins every day. And if you didn't get work today, tomorrow is drearer. It is worse than the previous day. Now, such a person who has done everything within their means to ensure that they've planned, they've thought, and circumstances beyond their control have actually thrown them a curveball.
My brother, I recognize that, and every time I speak in an opportunity like this, I don't do so lightly, because it's an indictment on us as a nation when that is happening.
No,
and so
that
if
is
you
growing. It isn't happening in this country.
Yeah.
What I've just described is like a growth industry. It's the numbers are keep being added every single day.
And so we have a calling. We do. If you have, there is a responsibility on you to share and to give. I honestly believe that. I believe that there are people in your current environment who are in need, I think you have a responsibility to help. And I think that's the thing. If we can be of help, that is useful. But I am not excusing even those in a difficult scenario, because I've seen it. I've seen two of my brothers at the church that I attend who had no opportunities, but they simply used to show up at church and help with setting up, putting the chairs out, doing whatever is there. They became of use, and before long, they were hired by the church. But they didn't come for an interview. They came to be of service. And the service is what allowed them the opportunity to do so. And talk to them. I'm telling you, you can come to our church, PCA Loreto, you'll see it there. These brothers were in a space in which they had no opportunity, but they created an opportunity for themselves by being of service. And they tell me of days that they used to come and they had not eaten. And it was an opportunity because when they were there and there's another team, some team may have been left, there's some tea and they'd have some tea there. And that was their meal for the day. But before long, people started saying, if they didn't show up, the chairs were not organized. The thing was, and saying, oh, we need these young men here. So come on. Opportunities are there for us to take them.
You know, the challenge that you've raised, which I find is perhaps not emphasized adequately or not given sufficient thought, is when you find yourself in that fortunate position where you not have plenty, simply you have another duty. It's a must. You must share.
Yeah.
Because when you share, then the very thing we're discussing doesn't just become a reality. There's a continuum to it.
Yeah.
So that you are actually acting as that wall that puts a halt to this downward spiraling situation that we're speaking of, simply by your action.
Yes.
You put a halt to it. And so if we were to expand that particular perspective to a larger group of people, then the dire situation that we have, if you look at it, is because people who have in their numbers aren't doing what they could do or what they're able to do to halt.
And let me tell you, I've seen it. My house help, she lives in Kangemi. And she and her family support a lady who takes in orphans, babies, infants who have been abandoned at hospitals or abandoned on the street. She has, I think, something like six or seven children in her house. She is single. She just simply took up. And what happened was when she took up the responsibility, now people are supporting her.
Right.
My wife challenged me this year. She's an amazing lady. But she said, look, she's a life coach, and so she's been helping students and kids in high income areas, right? And then she said, look, let's do something for the schools around our area, along Wayaki Way, the Kangemi area down to there. And we say, let's look for some schools that we can do the same program. And so she did it. So she raised the funds and provided the service at cost, okay? In going into those schools, one of the biggest issues that she faced, it was not a confidence issue. It was not a lack of goals issue. It was simply they have no books. And so she said, what can we do? And she said, she put out, she looked online for secondhand books, got a couple of them and started libraries. And she mentioned it on her social media. And guess what? In about a 3-month period, she had donations of over 1,000 books. To start libraries in these schools. Now, it seems like a little, but guess what? It means that those schools now have books that they can be able to read.
Books they didn't have before.
They didn't have them before.
So when we look at an individual level, how can you then save a situation whereby we say, okay, you had looking at the year as a period of time.
Yeah.
And you started off and say, okay, well, I had nothing in terms of where I'm resolute.
Yeah.
Can I still save? Can I still meet my goals? And how do I start?
You may not meet them by the end of this year, but you will meet them if you stick at them. And I think that's the reality that you were talking about before, City, where you're saying if you're thinking by the end of this year you'll have achieved the same goal, you may not, but guess what? You may also. Because if you set the challenge in front of you and now the parameters have changed, it may require a bit more creativity, but it is still possible.
And you see, the goal isn't one event.
Yes.
No. It is a summation of very many things that you're doing. So this question of failure The question ought to be at what point have you not moved up the ladder? Because it's a step by step by step until you get there. It isn't one of these eureka moments where you are there and then, as Ndu would say, voila, it's happened.
Yes.
No. There's a progression to it and there's a sequence to it. And at some point, yes, something may not quite work the way, but it's that one thing. Others have worked, but at that point. So it's identifying this one thing that requires the tweaking so that you can continue moving. Sometimes you just need to go around it.
Yeah. And surround yourself with people who challenge you. I think that's been one of my greatest, one of the things that I'm most grateful for to God is that in my life, I've been surrounded by people who challenge me to be better. In school, it was my brother who was always first in class, and he's older than me. He was index 1. So every teacher I met, I would follow him in the school. Every teacher I met, can't you be like your brother? And there's a challenge. I used to hate it, but now I think it pulled me up much further than I could have been. Most of my friends are older than me. Most of my dear friends are more successful than I am. So they challenge me to do better. Get around people who challenge you. Our founder of Centonomy, Washeke Ndwati, says, get away from the poverty support group, because the poverty support group are the ones who are always complaining. They have no solutions. It's always somebody else's fault. It's always somebody. It's the government, Sirikali, Nisaidia, the boss. Get away from those people. Get around people who are solving problems.
How do you start today, Waithaka, even as we start to wrap up this? How do you start today? Today, reality that we've talked about that's hitting you in the face. Reality of a government that's front and center. How do you start today? Goals, you're looking at them. How do you start today?
Fix up your room, get out and serve someone else. In service, you will find your purpose. Serve someone else. That means you're of value. Yeah.
And so, where do you have to think about? If you have to think and say, okay, this thing that I want to do, do you have to be deliberate in looking for a solution in terms of who it's going to help?
Yeah. Here's small step number 1: smile at the next person you meet. Just that. Greet them with joy. Give a compliment. What you put out in the world, you get back. That's what I've seen. So begin to put it out in the world, what you're aiming for, what you're going for. And then be purposeful. Like, I know we've kind of gone around this whole idea. When we set that goal, if you said you want to start saving, then save. If it's 5 shillings, put aside 5 shillings. It's 50, put aside 50. And imagine you have saved 5. You've started saving. And then that will become a greater reality in your life through the practice that we're talking about. Small changes add up to a huge difference over time. We were looking at pensions, where people are looking at a 3%, 3 to 6% contribution of their incomes towards their pension. If you are consistent with that over a 20-year period, it is significant. It's in the millions for most, even low-income earners that are going to support you. So small amounts, small shifts over time. Don't try and do everything at once. If you've never run a marathon, don't try and run 40 kilometers in one day. Imagine if you plan to run the marathon, get up and walk. Walk for 50 meters. Then tomorrow walk for 51.
Yeah.
You know?
And then move on from
there.
A pleasure having you today. Thank you very much. We can finish the year, or we can get into the last quarter of the year with something to go with.
You have 1 second for...
I have 1 second, yes.
1 second. If you fail, get back up again. Because you're still alive. If you're still alive, you have an opportunity.
Fantastic. Waithaka Gatumia is the CEO of Centonomy Limited. He's been our guest this hour. Some great things to go away with today in terms of morsels. Thanks for being here throughout the Situation Room.